Good afternoon, everybody. We're just hanging tight. I can see attendees joining. Give it a few more minutes and then we'll start the webinar. For those of you that just joined, we're just sitting tight for a few more minutes until everybody's joined. Okay, let's get started. I can see quite a few attendees now. Well, thank you very much for joining Advantage Business Systems on this informative webinar on DMARC. And we're holding this in conjunction with our partner called DMARC. Stephen will be running through the platform. We'll delve into DMARC's role in regards to email security and also deliverability. And then there's a section there you can put in your questions, which we'll try and address at the end of this time. What I'll do now is hand over to Stephen to take you through the webinar. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Christo. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out to spend some time with us today. As Christo mentioned, we're going to be touching on quite a few things DMARC related. I do understand that there are a few technical folk in the room, as well as a few business-minded individuals that really talk to different aspects of DMARC. So we'll keep it high level, and then of course, anyone that needs more information post this, please reach out to Christo and the team. There is a section for questions. If there are any questions, I'll try my best to read them out and answer them at the end. But let's get into it. So first things first, we wanted to do a little test with you guys on the call. I know it's not the greatest idea for a cybersecurity professional to ask someone to click a link or scan a QR code, but I assure you it's safe. And this is being recorded. It's a starting point. No one else is going to see this but yourselves. And we do this to show customers, where their starting point for their DMARC journey could be, if they haven't progressed it yet, or if they have progressed it, where they're at. So I want you to do yourself a favor quickly and just take your phone out, smartphone or QR scanner, scan that QR code, and it should execute to a web page, tools.zenmark.com. You can type that into your web browser as well. Simply type in your domain there, just your domain, and hit analyze the domain. It will give you a report back. If you can, download that report, reach out to Christo and the team afterwards, and just let them help explain and understand what it is that we can help you achieve from a DMARC perspective. So at DMARC, we have one goal and one goal only, is that to make the internet safer for everybody. And one of DMARC's roles is to essentially get everyone using it. It does then reduce drastically the capabilities of cyber criminals to do things like outbound domain impersonation, improve things like email deliverability, and improve overall branding presence and reputation protection on that end there. So that's our goal, and we're steading fast in making sure that we're achieving that. So email and DMARC, why? Well, firstly, email still the #1 communication tool that we utilize today. Yeah, there are some other applications that we may use for business, but by and large, email is still the primary communication tool, and it's being utilized more and more on a daily basis. The downside is that it's still the biggest vector of attack. And we see from various reports that 91% of the time cybercrime starts with an email. And I think you'll agree that ever since email's inception or creation of email, it hasn't really undergone any major evolutionary phases. We've just utilized third-party technologies to make it that much better. It's the same thing with email and DMARC. They are quite separate, but they work very well together to enhance business function and security. That's why we think it's important. I thought it was also pertinent to give you reasons to care. DMARC comes up, so what? Why should we care? What is it about? So I'm hoping today that we leave you with a couple of thoughts, at least to provoke some conversations at a later stage. But there's 3 reasons you should care, really. There's definitely an email problem, or a problem with this thing that we use on a daily basis. It is definitely real for you. It may not be visibly real for you, but there are ways and means that we are able to show and showcase that it is real for you, and it is worth fixing. Certainly not going to break the bank with a solution like this, but certainly something that adds great value to your business, not just from a security perspective. And after today, we're hoping to take some action with you guys with the help of Christo and the team. And the first thing is that we want to add your domains through to the platform. We want to analyze these threats and analyze impact to email deliverability on your side. And then we're essentially presenting the findings and a proposal through to you as business leaders, as technology leaders, to substantiate the value that DMARC carries and holds within a business and within certainly your business environment. But let's get into it, right? So this email thing, this tool that we use to communicate to customers, suppliers, anyone in our supply chain, effectively anyone in the world, right? It's an electronic form of physical email. That's why it was derived, make it easy, better, faster, quicker. But again, it is the number one tool that threat actors use to start business email compromise and things like that. There's many ways that this can happen. And one of the ways that we are seeing things progress at the moment is the rise of things like impersonation attacks, not specifically directed at you, but essentially directed at your customers, your supply chain, pretty much anyone that recognizes your brand on a global scale. The problem comes in is when an impersonation happens from an attacker's perspective, the person that you would normally speak to thinks that it's actually you, but it's not you. The even scarier thing is that that email didn't originate from your infrastructure, so you have no control over what happens to that email, simply relying on your customer, your supplier's inbox protection to detect something. Similarly with deliverability, there's a lot of fraudulent email purportedly coming from your brand being sent out in the World Wide Web. It degrades the value, or degrades the reputation of your legitimate email and could cause issues with deliverability. Certainly Google and Yahoo issued a notice late last year, beginning of this year, and then certainly in June, they switched on certain protocols, making it a lot harder for businesses and companies to send to their platforms, Google and Yahoo, without a DMARC record. Why? Because they want business owners and people that own domains to be able to prove that they actually own the rights to send mail from that domain. And that became tricky for a third reason, because we didn't have any visibility or ways to audit this. Like, how do we make sure that our deliverability isn't suffering? How do we make sure that our customers and suppliers aren't interacting with fraudulent email that look like they've come from us? And yes, to answer the first question that probably comes in, it is your responsibility as the domain owner. So these are the problems facing email today, other than the obvious ones from an inbound email perspective. And to give you an example of what an impersonation email could look like, this is one from Christo. He sent me an invoice, and I need to now pay that attached invoice. Looks pretty legitimate, some fancy Photoshop that we can do, but the reality is that these emails are out there. The bad guys are watching and listening, and they will target you to get to your bigger and larger, more strategic customers as an end result or a net result. But don't fear, guys. Christo and the team at advantage.co.uk are using SendMark to do their DMARC security for them, deliverability and monitoring. And this email, if sent by a threat actor, would never have landed in my inbox because their DMARC with us has protected them. We are able to help you understand the vulnerability in your businesses. Just reach out to us and we can chat to you. So I feel a little bit silly explaining how email deliverability works. So forgive me if this is something that you're very, very well familiar with or very well versed in, but it helps paint a better picture of where DMARC fits into your email environment. So we've got Bob in the middle over there. Now Bob's sending a very critical email to one of his suppliers who's actually going to receive that. And he makes use of various channels. The receiver has a plethora of technologies on their front end that allow them to filter out potentially nasty emails and make sure that they only get the clean emails that come through. But Bob uses these to send an email to the receiver. And essentially what we're doing to provide information that Bob is actually a legitimate sender, he's sending legitimate information, and it's come from authorized locations, because we're using a few protocols that are natively built into email platforms, right? Firstly, we need to prove that Bob is actually who he says he is, and that he's sending from his actual infrastructure, right? That we use something called SPF or sender policy framework. I won't bore you with the details, but basically it's proving identity, that Bob is who he says he is, and that it's come from one of his systems that are allowed to send mail on his behalf. The second component is we need to be able to make sure that mail wasn't intercepted or tampered with along its way. Right? How do we do that? If your email systems stop essentially once the email has broken out to the internet, how do we make sure that chains of custody have been maintained during its journey to the recipient side? Well, there's very clever ways we can do that. One of the ways is utilizing something called DMARC, another protocol that works quite well with email. Sometimes it's only set up internally, so Microsoft have the ability to do that. So does Mimecast, so do a couple of the other guys. We focus on the outbound DMARC services or domain key identifier messages. And that you could think of as almost like a cryptographic signature, proving that from the start of the email to the end where it was received, it hasn't been tampered with, intercepted, stopped, paused along the way. Because any attempts at intercepting or changing the details in there, kind of like ransomware fraud, where an invoice gets intercepted mid-flight and then changed and delivered to the person to pay, it changes that cryptographic signature, or breaks that signature, alerting the receiving server that something's happened to it, therefore helping prevent further interception. Now, those two policies or those two protocols are alive and well today and they work. They are, however, sometimes bypassable in most cases, because the recipient server, when it receives a notification that either one of these policies has failed, there's no instruction to tell that server what to do with that. So, hey, we've identified there's a failure over here. We don't have an instruction to either accept, quarantine, or reject it. So we're just going to accept it, end user interacts with it, and that's how we have business email compromise, damaged reputation, spread of ransomware, deposit fraud. And that's where DMARC comes in. DMARC is the enforcer and the reporter of that. So with DMARC, not necessarily sitting in your infrastructure, but at a DNS level, it allows you to enforce and report back on said failures and tell the receiving servers what to do with that email. I'm hoping this is making sense. I don't see any questions in the chat so far. But essentially, DMARC is that bodyguard that makes sure that the receiver receives clean email from an authorized sender that hasn't been tampered with or intercepted. Now, time for audience participation again. This QR code does something a little bit differently. If you don't believe what I've spoken about in the previous slide, if you believe off of that first QR code that there is a vulnerability in your environment, not at the behest of the people that have helped you set it up, but I urge you to take out your smartphones again, scan the QR code, and what it will do is it will ask you to essentially do a demonstration, an impersonation demonstration on yourself. Right? There's no malice or misintent behind it. It is a tool that we utilize at DMARC to showcase how easy these impersonation emails happen. Effectively, what will happen is it will take you to this page. At the top, you're going to be putting in your business email address, whatever it is. Please make sure that it is valid. And then at the bottom, you'll be putting in your personal mail address, whether it be Google, Yahoo, whatever it is. Hit the accept terms and conditions. We will be capturing this information, so if you don't want to do that, then you don't have to. But it is a good way to test and see if there is indeed a vulnerability from an impersonation on your domain. Again, nothing to do with your current setup. I'm going to go back there for a second just in case you want to have a look at that one more time. Any questions that need to be popped in the chat, let's pop them in the chat and we can go forward from there. By the way, we don't do anything with this information. It's just to say that we've stored it safe, secure, make sure that you understand that there is a test of an impersonation that is going to come through. What you will probably see based off of that, once you've got an email from yourself to yourself, what has actually happened is the backend tool has utilized a vulnerability on the domain itself, which is where there is no DMARC involved. And essentially along that analysis, if you're seeing that your domain is scoring a 3 out of 5 or less, you need to be chatting with us or at least any DMARC specialist. What we need to do, give you an example of the ratings, 0 out of 5 to 3 out of 5, vulnerable, and the 4s and 5s out of 5 have started their DMARC journey. So I suspect many of you will be on a different journey or a different state at that time. The idea here is not to scare any of you. The idea is also not to create anger or have upset people with regards to current configurations and setups. And we'll go through why that is in a couple of minutes. But we need to understand that if there is an opportunity to impersonate any of your domains, cyber criminals are probably doing that out there for some gain. And the result, this is the reason to care, and this is the reason why it's good to fix, is because these are the top 4 conversations we have with clients on a daily basis. We've had a deposit fraud action happen against us. Someone paid a fraudulent invoice. We're going to court because we apparently have sent ransomware to one of our strategic customers. We've lost a couple of customers because of really poorly written and configured emails that purportedly have come from us. And lastly, it's just really bad luck that they see that it's an email that's purportedly coming from our CEO, firing them as a client. So lots of these damages cause financial loss, cause reputational damage, etc. And that's what we're here to try and protect against and prevent against, right? And it's as simple as switching on a DMARC recording and allowing us to work with you to configure it correctly and appropriately. Very quickly, this happens in an interesting way. It's a design that, or it's a design that's been flawed from the beginning, but it needs to work this way because otherwise things like Microsoft and Sophos and all of these other systems that send email on our behalf won't work. You can picture yourself in the center over there on the left-hand side as the business that utilizes those cloud services. Any number of you would probably be using a mixture of these or some other cloud services. And when you subscribe to them, you're basically giving them permission to impersonate you. So when I receive an email or Krista receives an email from you using any of these systems, it looks like it's come from you, but in fact, it's come from one of these systems, which is okay impersonation. Problem is that that leaves the bad guys open to doing exactly the same thing. They spin up a server anywhere around the world, leverage the vulnerability that is on the domain without a DMARC record or a DMARC enforcement policy, and they send email to your employees, your customers, your suppliers. And the folks in the middle, unfortunately, because of the trusted relationship that they have with you, will probably interact with those mails, and the damage is then done. So what these criminals are doing is they're abusing a trusted relationship between you and your supply chain. That's how this happens. So now that we've had a look at the why it's important and the how this happens, how is your existing infrastructure protecting you, and where does DMARC fit in from that perspective? Well, at the moment, you've got a pretty robust perimeter defense strategy, I would assume. Working with Krista and the team, they would have done a lot by way and large of that, which is really important. It's also important to note that we're not here to replace any of that. Right? Your perimeter security is there designed for a specific purpose to protect you from external threats, attackers directly attacking you. By doing such a great job, what you've done is you've left the outside world vulnerable. Different departments, the UK government is talking about it, the National Cyber Security Council of the UK is talking about it. There's a lot of regulatory compliance mechanisms coming into play effective from next year, one of them being PCI, DSS 4.1. Google and Yahoo have spoken about it. DMARC is becoming more and more important because of the role that it plays. And you as domain owners and utilizers of those domains, it's up to you to protect communication coming from your business and your brands. And that's where DMARC comes in. So your perimeter security absolutely stays. We don't look after any inbound email security. That's not what DMARC is designed to do. DMARC is designed to take care of your communication once it's left your infrastructure. We didn't come up with DMARC. It was created a couple of years ago by a consortium of really smart individuals from the businesses you see on the right-hand side. Very well-known businesses, very well-known brands. And they came up with this global security standard, right? It's a global security standard for email, meaning it's going to be enforced upon you at some point to stop a problem that we've just explained around poor email deliverability due to bad reputation of email sending, as well as impersonation. And then obviously enforcement and reporting is important too. And this global security standard solves 4 problems when it regards to outbound email. Solves the impersonation problem, doesn't stop the bad guys from trying to impersonate you, but having the correct policy in place, which we can help you get to very quickly, it prevents those emails from successfully being delivered. And we can showcase where live attacks and instances have actually happened. Now, it's important to note that organizations have in the past attempted to do this themselves because it's something that you can possibly do on your own. However, the challenge there is the information that you're working with is highly complex in most cases and sometimes illegible in other cases. You would require a specialist to do that. So working with Krista and the team, we're able to then take you on, make the relevant changes on the domain to ensure that this global security standard is active and appropriate for your business. Excuse me. I spoke to some of the regulators. Go do your homework, go do your research. It is becoming more and more prevalent in the cyber security world. Cyber Essentials is starting to make it a list of priorities as well. So if you're speaking to anyone around Cyber Essentials, that's starting to creep up more and more there. And the global adoption rate of DMARC that we're seeing at the moment is around 80 to 85% globally. Year on year, more businesses taking this on, not just in the UK, Ireland, Europe alone, globally. What are we doing over here is when we showcase this to you, add your client logo over there to make sure that you understand that we're talking about you to your business. We've designed what we call the DMARC platform. It is our portal, it's proprietary to us, our technology, and essentially what we're doing there is we're allowing all your DMARC data to flow into there, and we work with your technical teams and Krista and the team to implement the DMARC security standard. We take that difficult to read and almost illegible information, extract it, make it readable, easy to understand, and we've built the software platform designed specifically for that. The second component of our business are our people, right? Our people are very hyper-focused individuals, very specific to DMARC. Their backgrounds and their histories are email and cybersecurity related, over decades worth of experience combined, and they will work with you proactively to implement this global security standard. Where most of our competition falls short is their people, because they were potentially selling a platform and allowing you to then manipulate and implement alone. And that comes to my third promise, is that we will guarantee P equals reject on your DMARC enforcement policies within 90 days or less, working with us. And that's part of why our mission is to stop email impersonation and make the internet a safer place. The journey here is quite simple. Just making sure everyone can see on the next screen. I'm seeing it on the screen, it's still the previous logo. Let's try this one more time. Apologies for that. It doesn't seem to be moving to the next slide. Krista, what slide are you seeing?
I see DMARC joins forces. There we go, journey to protect.
Fantastic. So the journey here, folks, is not really a cumbersome one. It's quite simple and straightforward. What we can do is we can get your domain into DMARC. It doesn't require any contractual obligations, etc. And what we're basically doing is we're gathering that DMARC data, almost like a DMARC risk assessment phase, if you will. We enable the reporting, and we let that run for a period of 2 weeks, and then we sit with Christo and the team, and we analyze the data. Right? The data gets portrayed back to you in an easy way to consume and understand, and what we do is we highlight a couple of things like exposure areas where we feel, based on our experience, that there is exposure for your business and therefore risk. And then lastly, the recommendations, what we would potentially recommend to a client in your situation to fix and amend what's going on. And that happens in phase 2. We draft the project plan that we work with Christo and the team on. We then sit down with you. We certify your actual active live senders, be it Microsoft, Google, Sage, SAP, Salesforce, whatever the case may be. And we enable protection. Right. And that is our guarantee. It's within 90 days or less. The average time it takes us for a customer on average with 3 domains is about 63 days from start to finish. And then we monitor and maintain proactively at the back end so that you don't have to. The first phase, of course, there's zero cost involved there. Okay. So it's an easy way to analyze and see where the real risk is, create a decent business proposal or business case back to business, and then we are able to assist you with your DMARC journey. So the next steps, obviously what we would love to do is work with you very closely and your account managers to get your domains on to the CENMARC platform. Let's analyze those threats and any issues that you might be having with deliverability of email, and we can present those findings to you, and Christo can then chat to you about the proposal and the pricing and how that's structured. Really, we're trying to make this simple to use, simple to consume, and simple to deploy. I think that's one of the biggest advantages we have here. And that is that, folks, and everything that you need to know about DMARC. And yes, I will take questions now.
Stephen, one of the questions I've seen, and I've seen it before as well, people think they can do it themselves. Someone's asked, is there something we can manage ourselves? I know you touched on that briefly in one slide. Can you maybe just explain the way, how complex the XML files are when you try and do this via email yourself?
Yeah, sure. So it's a great question. For those that didn't hear, can I not just do this myself in my own business? Yes, you can. You can absolutely do it yourself. If you have the manpower and the ability to sift through thousands and thousands of lines of code that is raw DMARC data that will be sent to an internal mailbox that you create that will receive thousands of emails on a daily basis. You would have to sift through that and then understand and interpret that data to then make changes to SPF records, DKIM keys, and add the relevant keys and records to the sending platforms that don't have them natively situated or switched on. The difficulty therein is you don't know if you're making mistakes. You don't know if there are any problems with the work that's being done. And seldom we see that a customer does this and get to P equals reject, DIY as we call it, doing it yourself effectively. The benefit of using a third-party tool like CENMARC is that you have an automated platform that will do this for you. You have a dedicated team and resources that are proactively monitoring and managing this so that if anything pops up, we can proactively alert you to a potential change that needs to happen. Plus, we can prove things like email deliverability, DMARC compliance. We can prove reputation, blacklisting reports, threat analysis, threat and attack analysis within a platform like that. So all of that rich information would potentially be missing if an organization tried to do this themselves or successfully did this themselves. I hope that answers the question.
Cool. Thank you. I've got another one, or another few came in. Shouldn't known senders be usually DMARC certified like Microsoft, SAP, Salesforce? Why do we need to certify them? I'm guessing they're talking about using Microsoft or SAP, send emails on their behalf, but the customer has to realize that it's their domain name. SAP or Salesforce is sending on behalf of them, right? So it's the customer's ownership to have those records in place. They can't do it for them.
Correct. Correct. So if you go to like a SAP or a Sage or a Microsoft and you run that test, that domain security test on their domain, it might come up with varying results. I would assume businesses and brands like that would have this configured and covered. However, they're not going to configure it and cover it for you because they don't own the domain. You're buying the service from them, but you would then need to go in and make sure that it is configured and correctly and appropriately have the right records in place.
Yes, I mean, they are impersonating you, so yeah, you have to have the records in place, proving that it is really legitimate.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Another question from the same user: will you manage SPF and DKIM besides DMARC? I know the answer is yes, but is there anything you can elaborate on that?
Yes. So the way that we utilize our DMARC record, we don't use a TXT record. We generate a CNAME record for you. You would then include that into your DNS. And once that propagates, you then tell us, do you want us to manage your SPF and DKIM keys for you? We can do that straight from the platform as well. So that you don't need to manually manipulate it on your DNS. So we'll manage that as much as we can manage that you'll let us, we'll manage for you.
Okay, thank you. Another one is this a once-off service or is there an ongoing service afterwards? I know you touched on that as well, the ongoing monitoring that we do to make sure nothing is caught by mistake or anything malicious is happening.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. Another way to rephrase that question is once we get to DMARC reject, is there still a requirement to use a service like this? It's not a once-off. The configuration is a once-off, yes. But I would say that's 30% of the actual project work. 70% is we need someone to consistently monitor and manage that the compliance level remains the same. Any bad campaign against you would drop your compliance significantly to a point where it could potentially do harm if it's not proactively managed. So if you put it to reject and you stop using like a platform like this, it's again back to that do-it-yourself component where you're going to get a whole bunch of mails and raw XML or DMARC data into those inboxes. And the value that a platform like this derives for the field, the return on the investment there, it's just so much more valuable to have visibility, have a third party manage this for you on an ongoing basis. But happy to unpack that with the individual company or user at a later stage.
I know you and I spoke before about, we had a customer that had a marketing department and didn't get IT involved and went up and signed up for click dimensions and they couldn't understand why their emails weren't being delivered properly, having DMARC, and we could spot in the reports that there's now a new party trying to send email and had to approach the market.
Exactly. So a straightforward shadow IT right there, right? Marketing don't usually talk to IT security professionals such as ourselves. They go do their own thing and cause havoc. So having a tool like this will then help prevent things like that from happening.
Okay, well, thank you. There's no more questions, but if I can just recap what I've taken away from it, try not to sound too technical, but I can see some of my customers and there's some prospects on the attendee list, and I know probably most of you have perimeter security protecting your email inbound and outbound as much as it can, but the attackers are always one step ahead of us, and they've now realized that although it's been a few years that this consortium implemented DMARC, they're using that next step to try and impersonate you. So it's something you said, we all need to take ownership and make sure these records are implemented and managed to get a step ahead again, or at least to try and catch up with the attackers and prevent this next level. We do have a lot of customers that might be in agencies marketing that struggle to get proper email delivery. So we've been helping them, and it's key to ensure that these emails are then delivered successfully. And I know you mentioned, we got Yahoo and Google are the first two parties from the consortium that's now said we will be blocking emails over a certain number received from a domain if they don't have DMARC. Microsoft is next in line. They said that'll happen soon. So it's not really a choice. We need to get it in place to make sure, people can communicate effectively on email going forward.
Correct.
Well, thank you everybody for joining, and thank you, Stephen, for hosting this. Really appreciate that. And yeah, we'll be in touch with all of you to see if you want to have any further discussions and take us up on the service. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.